Cairo, April 8, 1904, noon. A rented apartment near the museum. A man sits at a desk with a fountain pen, and for exactly 1 hour, something dictates to him. Not a metaphor, not a feeling, a voice, speaking from over his left shoulder. That was his claim, and he swore to it until the day he died. The voice said its name was Aiwaz. It came back at the same hour 3 days in a row, noon to 1. Never early, never late, never longer. What it left behind is a book of 220 verses that quietly rewired the occult world for the next 100 years. One line from that book escaped into the culture. "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." You've seen it. It gets printed on posters, tattooed on arms, quoted by rock stars. And almost everyone who repeats it has it backwards. Because it doesn't mean do whatever you want. The people inside the tradition say it means something far stranger and far more demanding. A single secret purpose written into you before you could speak. You either find it or you spend your whole life running from it. The man holding the pen was Aleister Crowley. The newspapers would call him the wickedest man in the world. His mother called him something worse. She called him the beast. And she meant the one from the book of Revelation. He agreed with her. That's the strange part. He took the insult as a prophecy, and he spent the rest of his 72 years living up to it. This is the whispered version of his story, the one with the curse on the mountain, the number that follows him through museum halls and hotel rooms, the rocket scientist who tried to summon a goddess in the California desert, and the voice in the Cairo room that started all of it. It begins with a preacher who lost his voice. He was born Edward Alexander Crowley in 1875 into a family of Plymouth Brethren, one of the strictest sects in Victorian England. The Bible read aloud every day. Almost everything else, forbidden. The money came from brewing beer, which the family considered sinful enough to pray about. His father was the voice of that house, a traveling preacher, pouring out sermons about the end of the world. When the boy was 11, his father died of cancer of the tongue. The preacher lost the exact organ he preached with. The family called it God's will. The boy stopped speaking to that God entirely. Some say that's the day he started listening for a different one. He fought with his mother constantly, and during one of those fights, she reached for the worst name a Plymouth Brethren woman could imagine. She called him the Beast. Revelation chapter 13, the one whose number is 666. He didn't cry. He adopted it. He would sign letters with it for the next 60 years. At Cambridge, he shed his father's name and became Aleister. Rich, brilliant, unsupervised, with an appetite for experience that frightened the people around him. Then he went up into the death zone. In 1902, he was part of the first expedition ever to attempt K2, the hardest mountain on Earth. He reached about 6,553 meters. That height record on K2 stood until 1938. In 1905, he co-led an expedition to Kangchenjunga, the third highest mountain in the world. The porters believed the mountain was a god that tolerated no arrogance. The expedition mutinied against him. Then the avalanche came. 4 men died on that slope. Crowley did not leave his tent. He listened to them shouting, and he came down alone the next morning. He wrote that the dead men had disobeyed him and paid for it. And this is where the whisper starts, the one that follows him for the rest of his life, that misfortune finds the people who cross him. The porters said the mountain was angry. Others quietly began keeping a different list, because by then he'd already been initiated. In 1898, he had joined a secret society in London called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The poet W.B. Yeats was a member. Its rituals traced back to older things, to the angel alphabet, dictated to John Dee's scryer in a crystal in 1583. Dictated books, remember that, It's a pattern that's about to repeat. Crowley tore through the order's grades in months, quarreled with everyone, and helped rip the whole society apart. Yeats loathed him. By 1904, he had the training, the money, the ego, and the grievance. He also had a new wife, Rose, married in haste, and they were in Egypt. The honeymoon was supposed to be tourism, pyramids, hotels, the museum. One night, half as a performance, he recited an old invocation over their room. Nothing happened to him. Something happened to Rose. Rose was not an occultist. She knew nothing about his rituals and cared less. But she began slipping into a state he couldn't explain, saying the same thing over and over. "They are waiting for you. They are waiting for you." He tested her. He asked her questions no beginner could answer. Technical things, names and correspondences buried in systems she had never studied. She answered them. So he set a trap. He took her to the Egyptian museum and told her to walk to the god who was speaking. She passed hall after hall of gods, statues she ignored. She stopped in front of a painted wooden funerary stele of a priest named Ankh-F and Khonsu, a dead man's monument showing the sky goddess arched over the world and the falcon-headed god enthroned. Then he looked at the exhibit label. The museum's catalog number for that stele was 666, the number his mother had thrown at him across a kitchen 25 years earlier, waiting for him in a glass case in Cairo. The story says he went pale. He called it the Stele of Revealing, and he believed for the rest of his life that it had been placed there for him. The instructions came through Rose. Enter the room at exactly noon. Sit at the desk. Write down what you hear. Stop at exactly 1. April 8th, 9th, and 10th, 1904. 3 days, 3 hours, 1 book. He said the voice came from over his left shoulder, educated even, unhurried. He said he never saw the speaker clearly. What he wrote down became Liber al vel Legis, the Book of the Law, 220 verses. In the manuscript, the handwriting changes. It speeds up, it slants, and in places, it stops being his. The book named its own law, Thelema, Greek for will. And here the numbers begin. In Greek gematria, where every letter is a number, Thelema adds to 93. Agape, the Greek word for love, adds to 93. The name Aiwass, in one spelling, adds to 93. To this day, people inside the tradition greet each other with a number. They just say 93. The book announced that an age of the world had ended, the aeon of the dying god, the age of sacrifice and sin and atonement expired. A new aeon had begun, ruled by the child Horus. Every religion built on a dying god was now old paper. That's what the voice claimed, in 1904, in an apartment in Cairo, in 3 hours. Here's the detail people miss. Crowley said he was horrified by it. He claimed he shoved the manuscript in a suitcase and tried to forget it, and that it refused to be lost. It resurfaced again and again, and in 1909, in an attic, it found its way back into his hands one final time. After that, he stopped fighting it. He spelled magic with a K to separate what he meant from card tricks. His definition sounds almost boring. The science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Read it again. There's nothing about demons in it. That's deliberate. In his system, anything done from your true will is magic. Walking, writing, building a rocket, anything. True will is the core of the whole thing. The claim is that you were made for exactly one purpose, the way a river is made for the sea. Most people never find it. They drift, they copy their neighbors, they do what they merely want. Do what thou wilt is not permission. It's a sentence of hard labor. Find the one thing. Do it. Give up everything else. And the second half, the half nobody tattoos. Love is the law. Love under will. Not love as a feeling, love as the force that joins you to the thing you were made for, under will, aimed. His tools were stranger than his definitions. Yoga learned in Ceylon, ritual practiced until it became muscle, and one rule he enforced on every student: keep a magical diary and treat your own visions with total skepticism. Record what you attempted, what happened, and be brutal about the difference. It's the one instruction in his entire system that works whether or not you believe a single other word of it. But belief has an address. In 1899, he had bought a house called Boleskine on the south shore of Loch Ness. He bought it for one reason: an old grimoire operation, the Babalon Working, which requires months of seclusion and which summons the 12 kings and dukes of hell to be bound before the angel arrives. He started it, and then he was called away, and by his own account, he never properly banished what he'd gathered. The stories around that house never stopped. A lodge keeper who lost his mind, a local butcher who cut through his own hand with Crowley's note lying on the counter, shadows in rooms with the lamps lit. Decades later, the house was bought by Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, who barely dared to live in it. It burned in 2015. What was left of it burned again in 2019. Believers will tell you, quietly, that the operation was never closed. In 1920, he moved to Sicily, to a small villa outside Cefalù, and painted the words, "Do what thou wilt," over the door. He called it the Abbey of Thelema, after a fictional abbey in an old French book whose only rule was exactly that sentence. Inside, he painted the walls himself, floor to ceiling. Gods, demons, and things with no name, some of them so obscene that visitors refused to describe them in letters home. Residents kept magical diaries. There were rituals at dawn. There were drugs, heavily. There was almost no money. The heroin wasn't rebellion, at least not at first. A London doctor had prescribed it for his asthma, back when Bayer sold heroin in bottles, as medicine, next to the aspirin. It never let go of him. He fought it in his diaries for 25 years, dose by dose. And the diaries do not read like a wicked man. They read like a drowning one. Then, in 1923, a 23-year-old Oxford undergraduate named Raoul Loveday died at the Abbey. His widow went to the London press, and the press printed a story with everything: blood, ritual, a sacrificed cat, a chalice. The quieter account is that he drank from a mountain spring he had been explicitly warned not to touch. Either way, a young man walked into that house and came out in a coffin. A tabloid called John Bull gave Crowley his crown: the wickedest man in the world. He kept the headline like a trophy. Mussolini's new government was less amused and expelled him from Italy that same year. The abbey was abandoned. The locals whitewashed every wall. As if paint could be an exorcism. It couldn't. In 1955, the filmmaker Kenneth Anger traveled to Cefalù with the sex researcher Alfred Kinsey and peeled the whitewash back. The paintings were still under there, every one of them, waiting. The last decades are a long fall. He sued a friend over the phrase black magic, lost, and was ruined by the costs. He drifted between boarding houses with his tarot cards and his heroin. And still, in that wreckage, he made the two things experts call his masterpieces: the Book of Thoth, painted over 5 years with Lady Frida Harris, and Magick in Theory and Practice, the manual his students still open first. He died on December 1st, 1947, in a boarding house in Hastings, aged 72, nearly broke. At the funeral, someone read his hymn to Pan aloud over the coffin, and the town council called it a black mass, and made sure nothing like it would happen in their chapel again. And the papers whispered one more thing: that his doctor died within a day of him. The story went around that the beast had settled a debt on his way out. The world assumed the story ended there. The world was wrong. 20 years after he died, more or less forgotten, his face appeared on the cover of the most famous album ever made, Sgt. Pepper, 1967. Back row, second from the left. The Beatles put him there. Bowie sang his name. Ozzy Osbourne wrote him a song. Jimmy Page bought his cursed house on Loch Ness and filled it with his relics. But the music is the small part. The strange part is the space program. Jack Parsons was a self-taught chemist from Pasadena who co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the lab that would later put rovers on Mars. Before rocket tests, witnesses said, he would recite Crowley's Hymn to Pan, the same poem read over Crowley's coffin. Parsons ran the American branch of Crowley's Magical Order from a mansion on Orange Grove Avenue, and the FBI kept a file on the parties. In 1946, Parsons drove into the Mojave Desert to perform the Babalon Working, a series of rituals meant by the plain text of his own papers to open a door and call a goddess into flesh, a moonchild. His scribe and partner in the operation was a young naval officer and pulp writer named L. Ron Hubbard, who would go on to found Scientology. That sentence is real, and it never stops being strange. Crowley, old and dying in England, heard what they were attempting and wrote to his students that he was appalled by the idiocy of it. Think about that. Even the beast thought the door should stay shut. Parsons died in 1952 at 37 in an explosion in his home laboratory that has never stopped growing theories. There is a crater named Parsons on the moon. It sits on the far side, the side that never faces the Earth. Believers point that out, and then they just let it hang there. So count what the dead man owns. A religion with initiates on every continent. An order still swearing people in by candlelight. A house that burned twice. A crater on the hidden face of the moon, named for his disciple. And one sentence loose in the culture, with its meaning filed off. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Strip away the incense and the number games, and one serious question is left standing in the smoke. It's the question the voice in Cairo asked, whatever that voice was. Do you know what you're actually for? And are you doing it, or are you just doing what you want? I put this whole line of thinking, from the Hermetic tradition down through the Law of Attraction teachers, into a book called The Law of Attraction, What They Actually Taught. 129 pages with a 30-day workbook. The link is in the description. And if this was worth your time, subscribe. One of these a week. Weird, deep, and from the sources. The last two were the Kabbalion and the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and both are the water Crowley was swimming in. 93.